One of the most interesting prophecies found in the Old Testament and the New is the rebuilding of the temple in the last days. There are over 40 prophecies found in the Bible that tell us that there must be a third temple, a temple that will be built by the Jews, in which there will be daily sacrifice of lambs, a sacrifice that will be stopped halfway through the 7-year tribulation by the Antichrist. The Bible tells us that when he stops the daily sacrifice, somebody, possibly a Jewish believer, will kill him with a sword wound to the neck and head. He actually dies. The whole world knows that the world leader has died, who's up to this point been claiming to be a Messiah. However, he satanically rises from the dead. I would guess probably a few days later in imitation of the prophecies of Jesus. When he rises from the dead satanically, Revelation 13 says the whole world worships the beast that has the wound by the sword and yet lives. The temple has a tremendous role to play in the last days. There hasn't been a temple for well on to 1900 plus years. Can there be a new temple again? Obviously, to anyone who looks at any of the pictures we take in Israel of the beautiful Temple Mount, dead center on the Temple Mount is the beautiful Dome of the Rock. It was built around 691 AD, built by the Arabs, and it is the most beautiful religious building probably in existence today as an ancient building. I have been in it extensively and photographed, and yet that building stands where the Muslims and many other Jewish authorities also believe the temple used to stand. In the center of it is a rock that is believed to be, by the Muslims and some Jewish authorities, the rock upon which Isaac was about to be sacrificed when God provided the supernatural provision of the ram, that he might not have to be killed. The truth of the matter is, archaeologists have found some intriguing discoveries that suggest that the original temple was not where the Dome of the Rock is, but in fact is in the area that is wide open to the north of the dome, that is directly opposite the sealed eastern gate. If this is so, it is possible, just possible, that the temple could be rebuilt without in any way disturbing the Dome of the Rock or the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is even further to the south. Now, under Jewish law, which is called status quo, that was introduced first by the Turks, then held by the British Mandate, and the Jews have bought into the same law, it is impossible for any religious site to be turned into another religious site. In other words, if it's Muslim, it must stay Muslim. So even though some teachers have suggested that perhaps a missile would hit the Dome of the Rock and thereby destroy it, or an earthquake, and that thereby the temple could be built, that is not possible. Israel would not do it by its own law and its own principles, but also the nations of the world would never stand for it. The Dome of the Rock would be rebuilt to the inch where it is now. And so there must be another solution. I think that solution is found in Revelation 11, 1 and 2. John was taken by the angel into the future, and here's what he saw. The angel said, measure with a rod the temple, the worshipers, and the altar. And he says, but don't measure the court that is without, because it's given over unto the unbelievers for 42 months. I believe what John is saying to us 2,000 years ago is that side by side with the beautiful Dome of the Rock, just to the north, 150 feet away, will be the southern wall of the rebuilt temple. And there will be no defilement of one site by the other. Time alone will tell if that's fulfilled. For 2,000 years since the temple was destroyed, Jews have prayed 3 times daily, and the prayer has been, may it be thy will that the temple be speedily rebuilt in our days. Exodus chapter 25, verse 8, is the prophecy and the command of God. Let them build a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. Now this was given first of all to Moses, and it was fulfilled in the tabernacle in the wilderness through the Exodus. But that was only the beginning. When 500 or so years later, King Solomon, in obedience to the command of God and the materials that have been accumulated by his father, King David, according to the blueprints that the Bible says in 2 Chronicles were given to King David, the temple was built, the most beautiful building the world had ever seen, covered with gold within and without. This building had more wealth in it than any other building that has ever been before or since. This temple was built and it became the center of worship. The Ark of the Covenant was brought up to that temple and put in the Holy of Holies. And the animal sacrifice began on the Temple Mount. What we know is that there are very distinct prophecies that there will be a rebuilt temple. The Bible tells us in Micah chapter 4, verse 1, "But in the last days it shall come to pass, that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established in the top of the mountains, and it shall be exalted above the hills, and the people shall flow unto it." The Temple Mount is on the top of Mount Moriah. And though it doesn't look like a huge mountain, it is a mountain. And the Bible tells us that nations will send representatives forever in the future up to the temple. That temple must be built. There today is a group in Israel called the Faithful of the Temple Mount that has been working politically and religiously trying to bring about the conditions for the rebuilding of the temple. Though they've suffered much opposition, symbolically, they bring a foundation stone up to the Temple Mount once every year. The police always stop them, but they are committing themselves to, by this foundation stone being brought up in the truck, that they are committed to rebuilding the temple when God gives the signal. The Sanhedrin was the holiest and most important judicial body in Israel. Remember that in the days of Jesus, the Sanhedrin met in the half-stone chamber attached to the temple on the Temple Mount. We know that Nicodemus, Joseph of Arimathea were both members of the Sanhedrin. These 71 highest Jewish legal representatives chose the law and interpreted the law, and they judged Jesus in that time. The Sanhedrin finally ceased to exist around 450 AD. They met last in Tiberias, and for 1,500 years there has been no Sanhedrin, no highest court of law for the Jews. Yet without the Sanhedrin, they cannot choose the law, they can't choose the rules, the location, they can't give instructions for the animal sacrifice. It was necessary, if the temple was ever to be rebuilt, to reconvene the Sanhedrin. In January of 2005, the new Sanhedrin was convened. First, they met in Tiberias in the fall, and then they met in Jerusalem in January of 2005. They have chosen a temporary president. 71 of the top rabbis of Israel have joined, including Rabbi Israel, who was the chief paratrooper who approached the Western Wall in June of 1967 when they captured the old city of Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. He, as a rabbi, has devoted 20 years of his life to the reconvening and fabrication of over 80 of the vessels required for the Temple Mount, for the worship. All of these things, such as the golden menorah, the breastplate of the high priest, the table of showbread, have already been made meticulously according to the rules both in the Bible as well as in the Talmud and the Mishnah that describes Jewish worship in the ancient days. These objects that have now been created make it possible for the reconvening when it's possible to rebuild the temple. The Sanhedrin has just convened only a couple of months ago with a view to choosing the actual location of where the temple must be built. They have authorized a group of Levites to be trained in animal sacrifice. They are literally getting ready for one of the most astonishing fulfillments of prophecy in history. They are preparing the worship items. They have actually made a computer registry of over 300,000 Kohanim. These are Jews whose name is Cohen. Now, the only Jews who can actually prove their tribal legacy are Jews from the tribe of Levi. Now, many other Jews have traditions that they're from Judah, from Naphtali, from Dan. But the only ones who can prove it are those who are named Levi, or within the tribe of Levi, those who are named some variant of Cohen or Kohanim. The Kohanim were the sons of Aaron. They were very involved in worship in the temple with music and other parts of worship. This computer registry of Kohanim are willing to serve when the temple is rebuilt is a very, very encouraging sign. Now, one of the problems